Thanks to everybody here who is in the room. I appreciate your taking the time and paying attention. We are also recording these sessions, so for everybody who's listening online later, my name is Father Louis Powell. I am the rector of St. Michael's Church in San Clemente, California, and you can find the link in the notes. Previously, in our discussion of leadership, we are here to discuss leadership, Christians being leaders at home, at work, and in the church. Previously, in our sessions, we've talked about, what is our call as Christians to be leaders? And I like to always begin with this reminder that we are all, each of us, created in God's image, and that is a great and high calling. And Jesus, at his ascension, gave us a mission. We were commissioned to go into the world, to make disciples, to baptize, and to teach. So we are all called as Christians to lead at some level in our life. We also spent some time talking about the qualities that we aspire to embody, the character that we have inside us. We also talked about the traits that we exhibit in our life, the things that build our reputation as a leader, who we are perceived to be. And we also talked last time about the process we go to that is a part of leadership. Today, we're going to continue with our focus on leadership in communication. What is the role of communication and leadership? And to begin, I want to talk about what makes communication effective. And I have a couple of quotes up there, I'm sure. Yes, people respond more to how you feel about them than what you say to them. People care more about how you feel about them than what you say to them. And that's conveyed in the words you use. That other quote that's under there, listen to my tone, not my words, and I have caramels, that comes from a show that I watch, have seen, Better Off Ted. And the main character, Ted, is delegated to one of his cohorts to lead the group, and she's trying to figure out how to do that. And he explained to her that they don't listen to her words, they listen to her tone. And then he also said, and I also carry caramels with me. So she responds in this crowd, and they're listening, but they're not getting anything. She said, listen to my tone and not my words. And I have caramels. And they all responded by saying, her tone is right. So I always found that as a funny example. If you have a chance to look at that, you will laugh too. And the other quote I have up there, as we begin to understand how we effectively communicate, is that it is about the feelings that we share. Real communication is feeling what the other person is feeling at the time and accepting them for it. You are hearing, you are feeling what they're feeling. You have empathy for them. You can understand their point of view, and you're not there to judge or convict them. So here are some rules that help you be effective in communication. And we'll just list, I have lots of lists, we'll go through these lists. And the first one, and the most important one, is to stop talking and to listen. If you're talking, you can't hear. The other one, the next one goes with that very much, and that is put the talker at ease. And you listen to that, right? You're the one to stop talking. That means the other person is the one you want to be talking. And you want them to be comfortable so that they will share with you what's on their heart. The point is to get them to talk to you. And so set them at ease and listen, and that requires not talking. It is almost a lost art to be able to conduct a dialogue. And if you watch, I watch a lot of interviews or a lot of panel discussions on YouTube, learning, studying, and it is remarkable to me how everybody takes turns. You know, the sacrifice you make in having a dialogue with someone is to take turns, meaning you have to shut up. You have to stop talking. You have to be able to listen. There's also things that are important that you demonstrate as you're listening. So when I say remove distractions or show that you want to listen, your eye contact matters. How your posture is matters. You're conveying a lot. We make probably half of our communication with people is through our mannerisms. We'll talk later about, there's in-person communication, there's communication by phone, and there's communication by email. And the same words in person, on the phone, or in an email are received completely different because you keep losing important elements of what you're communicating. When you go from in person to the phone, you lose all of your mannerisms, your eye contact, the look on your face, the way you're standing, all those things. And when you go from being on the phone to being in an email, you lose the tone of your voice. I have a lot of sidebars on here, so bear with me. When you're on the phone, smile. It's like, why would it matter? I don't know, but I do know that people who care and study those things, that if you're smiling when you're talking on the phone, the person at the other end of the phone will like you better because they think you're happy talking to them. How does that work? Magic. And when you go from the phone to an email, all of that disappears and all you have is words. And it becomes a landmine of like what you're thinking, how you're feeling doesn't make it into the email itself. And so you ought to be careful in those things. So that is like showing that you want to listen and remove distractions. And I'm going to say, we have a name for this thing. Its name is distraction. It is distraction. It will vacuum you into that. And if you are talking to someone while you're looking at the phone, something that you need to understand completely is that the human being is incapable of multitasking. Your brain does not work that way. You can pay attention to one thing at a time and one thing only. And if you're looking at your phone, that's what you're paying attention to. If your phone is in front of you and you're talking to somebody, you're not paying attention to your phone. It has to be one or the other. You always have to pick one. There's no such thing as multitasking. That's what I believe. Empathizing is an important element when you're communicating and you're talking to someone. Showing that you believe what they're saying, showing that you care about the things that they care about. If somebody is talking to you, they care about something enough to share it with you. Part of your communication is to care with them, empathize with them. It helps you to see their point of view. It helps you to listen better and to understand better. Be patient and hold your temper. That's really important, because if you are the kind of person that people will talk to, then they will tell you things that will make you mad and tell you things that will try your patience. Save that for later when they're not there. While you're there with them, just be patient and don't be angry. One of the things that's important to understand about communication when you're wanting to be effective in communication is that emotion and logic are different things. And we all know this, right? But we have an idea sometimes that logic is legitimate and emotion is not. But what I'm saying is logic is human and emotion is human. They both exist and they're both real and they're both valid in their own place. And so if you're trying to solve an emotional problem with logic, you will fail. You will fail. my favorite, always, I say here, ask questions to gain understanding. My feeling is that very, very few people know how to ask a question. And I always give this example. My mother asking me frequently, "What were you thinking?" No matter how many times I tried to explain it to her, she was never interested in the answer to that question. She was not saying to herself, I need to gain some understanding, and that would help me if my son would just explain to me what he was thinking. She never cared about the answer, because what she was really saying in her question was, what you did was dumb, right? Don't do that ever again. That's what the question meant. Well, we're all like that. We all ask terrible questions. I do too. Well, my daughters are here, and I have a sister who was babysitting them once when they were small, and this is a famous question. They were misbehaving, and they were not doing what she said. And she demanded them in an elevated tone of voice, "Are you going to tell me no one more time?" How do you answer that? You say nothing. So when you're asking questions, be careful. But there are some things that you need help to understand better. Focus your questions on being able to bring out that information. When I said earlier, you want to make people comfortable so that they will share with you, asking questions as an opportunity for them to share with you something that will help in your understanding of what you're sharing in your communication. And the last rule, of course, is stop talking. Sounds a lot like the first rule, stop talking. It's almost every rule on the list, stop talking. There's a lot of different kinds of communications, and we'll talk later about more written and formal and informal and things like this, but these tasks, these elements of how you communicate effectively, as you've been listening, are almost all related to what you do face-to-face, in-person, one-on-one. But if you're involved in any kind of organization, you're going to be in a group, you're going to be at a meeting, and so you have to adapt this set of rules to those environments as well. Like I say, this is primarily one-on-one, face-to-face, but there's also rules you need to figure out how to adapt those to the different kinds of communication environments that you'll be in. Now, how do we know if we're successful? What is a successful communication? A lot of understanding a successful communication is when you have the sense with everyone else who's involved in this communication that you're in agreement, you're in unity, and you're all on the same team. Communication brings people together, or it ought to. It ought to, or it's meant to, and when you're successful, it brings the people that you're communicating with together into unity around whatever is the purpose of what you're communicating. So you want to gain acceptance of the people that you're communicating with. You want to provide meaningful reasons for whatever's, the information being shared, decisions being made, things being done. Where you can share meaningful reasons, it's important. I think about this a lot as a father, as my kids were growing up. It was my purpose to say yes as often as possible. I'm sure my children will tell you it must not have ever been possible to say yes. But I did. But then there's this other side, is you have to say no. And every time you have to say no, if you can explain why, then that's important in terms of building trust. Because sometimes you'll have to say no without any reasons. And people have to be able to trust you enough to say, okay, I'll do that. I had an experience when I was a young Marine. not as young as I was sharing earlier, but I was a platoon commander in artillery, and I was in a morning staff meeting with the commanding officer of the battery commander, and through the list of tasks we had, there was one task that was, I would say dumb. It was a dumb thing to do. And so the meeting ended. Everybody stood up, and we're all in his office, and you stood up, and the door opened, and people filed out. And I just went around and got in the tail end of the line, and as everybody filed out, I shut the door. So it's me and the commanding officer stood in front of his desk, and I said, "That thing you said, that's a dumb thing, and no one should ever do it." And he looked me in the eye, and he said, "I know. Do it for me." And I said, "Okay." And I walked out the door, right? Because you want to have that kind of open communication with others. You want to trust them. I walked out the door, and the sergeant who worked for me came up and he said, "You know, Lieutenant, that is really a dumb thing." And I said, "I know. Do it for me." When you can explain all of the reasons and justifications behind what you're doing, then do it, because there'll come a time when you can't. And what I knew in that whole thing, when I told my commander this was dumb, it was stupid, and he said, "I know, do it for me," is that all the way up the chain of command, that conversation had been held already. All right? So the complaint, the reason, the whole thing had already been discussed, but for reasons unknown, it was a necessary thing. And so you do it. So when you can give a reason, do it, because you won't always be able to. Persuading is something that is best done in person. If you have to persuade somebody of something, do it in person. Also in your communication, you want to be able to provide the means of feedback. You want people to be able to dialogue back with you over the things that you're communicating. Isn't always true. We're going to talk about channels of communication in a minute, and there are lots of different ways to communicate with people. And don't be afraid to use multiple methods. And the goal, the end that you're trying to get to, is that you have a shared understanding. There's something that you share with each other over the topic of the thing that you've been discussing. So let's talk about those different channels. There are different channels of communication. And part of what, this is, when I think of that, what are the channels of communication? I think of there's in-person, there's the phone, there's the email, now there's chat, there's group chat, and a whole myriad of methods, a whole myriad of channels. But that's not exactly what I'm talking about in this case, because this kind of communication applies across all of those means that we use in order to communicate. But there are channels that are for us formal or informal. Formal communications or informal communications. There are communications that carry with them more prestige than others. Official communications. There are organizational means of communication. There are like interpersonal, one-on-one methods of communicating. Back when I worked in an IT world, there would be the meeting that you're sitting on and you're listening to, and you're engaging in whatever the topic is, and then there would be my boss and I chatting on the side, or me and my peers chatting on the side, or other people that I worked with. All of this happening at once, right? Interpersonal, group, sometimes simultaneously, all of those things are happening. And so we kind of call those out and say, well then, which channel is fit for the purpose of the communication that I'm making right now? There is a purpose in my communication. What's the proper channel? And so we've kind of listed those out there. Important, significant, urgent. Then use them all. Use whatever is available to you. especially if it's urgent and important. You want to get the word out, so just communicate it. If it's something that has to go out fast, informal channels go fastest. The grapevine is the fastest form of communication. There is a big push out in the world to differentiate between work that can be done remotely and work that has to be done in office. And in office provides very powerful, quick, fast, interpersonal, informal channels for fast communication. If you want to influence what's going on, then you want to use the most official and the most prestigious form of communications that you have available to you. Let the prestige of the mode of communication lend weight that enhances the influence over what you're communicating. If it's policy, you have to use official channels. Has to be done officially. That's policy. Practices, like here's the methods that we use, here's the procedures that we're implementing, that's more interpersonal, getting people to do the thing. Dealing with attitudes, that's informal, interpersonal. That is ways of sharing. It's like your value channels. You want to keep attitudes aimed in the right direction. You want to make sure that people are working together and not at odds against each other. So that's something to care for, to pay attention to, focus on. Knowledge. Knowledge is teaching. Formal channels. I have on the list ideological channels. It's more about the audience. They're all formal. Kind of about the audience that you're gathering there. And the last comment on here, the message is most clear for types that are typical for that channel. And that's just true. It's like, what do you expect when you walk into this room? This room is set up for a thing. I expect it, and when that thing happens, it makes sense. If something else happens, it's like, I don't get it. It's the same when you walk into communications. If it's the kind of information that's suited to that form of communication, then it will make sense easier and faster. And that is a part of understanding the channels, with the primary focus on there is fit the channel to the purpose of the communication that you're making. It's fit for purpose. The next area I want to talk about with communication is how we evaluate the effectiveness of the communication. Yes, you should always measure and check how are the communications in the organization that I'm a part of. This is, in essence, a kind of health check. How healthy is the organization based on how well or poorly the communications are going? And I have on here at the top, a primary here is, are the people a priority? And this is an interesting kind of way that you have to approach this, because it's not like this is the rule and we always make people the top priority. Yes, kind of. We do. All through this, as we've talked about in leadership, the importance of caring for the people that you're working with and that you're leading, that you do have to care for them. You do have to empathize with them. You do have to watch out for them. But every organization exists for a purpose, and the people that are in the organization are there to help and advance the purpose of the organization. If you're working in a factory that manufactures widgets, then yes, we care about the people. But we care that the people are making and selling widgets. And so all of the caring that we are doing and empathizing and with is in order to make more and sell more widgets. There's a role you have to fulfill in that. And it's not that we are going to sacrifice the organization for the whims of the people. So it's a balance thing when you say, are the people most important? One of the organizations that I was a part of early in my career was an engineering company that manufactured computer electronic components. And there was a principle in that organization that our engineers are our greatest asset. And that was true. Engineers that were productive made the company profitable. And engineers that were distracted or kept from doing their job, not trained properly, not given the proper equipment, all those things are relative to making sure that the people there have everything that they need to be successful in the work that they're there to do. So it's not that we care for people at such a high priority that we forget the mission of what we're in. But at the same time, in an organization like that, other organization that I've always been a part of, the people that do the thing that is valuable are the things that's most important. The people that are doing the thing that's important. You can't separate those two, but you care for the people. For example, too, is that over the course of a long career in a particular place, there are going to be times in a person's life where their life unravels right before your eyes. They may be your top performer in every other way. And yet, at this moment, they're not. And now you have a decision to make. There was a very famous Jack Walsh ran Westinghouse or GE, something like that, and they had these rules that they would do. And at the end of the year, they would rank everybody. And the people at the top would get a giant pay raise and a huge bonus. And the bottom 10% would be fired. It was just like, end of the year, bottom 10%, you're fired. And he was credited with being a very smart guy who built a very powerful and effective organization. The problem was that your best performers can have a bad year. And you just fired your best performer. And everybody else saw what happened. And they said, I got this other opportunity. I'm going there. And over the long haul, that was a terrible, terrible move. Because it's not just about this immediate moment. That's what caring for people is. But it's also caring for people for the purpose of the organization that you're in. So when you're looking, how is our organization doing? How is this health check working out? Then there are questions that you can ask as you look around and say, are the leaders in touch with people? Do you see them? Can you talk to them? Do they exist, or are they lost in an ivory tower? Do people even know who the leaders are? Believe it or not, there are organizations that people don't know who they are. When you are solving problems, is it a cooperative enterprise among the people that are there? Knowing that helps you understand how well is this organization communicating? How healthy is this organization? Do people share information regularly, especially useful information? Are messages effective and credible? It's an old joke, right, about the company that had just lost a very important client that provided a good deal of their income, and they had a town hall, a company meeting, and the CEO is standing up there, and he says, "This is bad news, but we anticipated it. We have staffed for this so that there will be no layoffs." Any questions? First question. How many people are going to get laid off? Repeats himself. We planned for this. There will be no layoffs. Second question is, when do you think the layoffs will start? There will be no layoffs. It's just like, who do you think is going to be laid off? The credibility of the communication, let's say, was slim to none. Nobody believed him. So that's a part of, when you hear the communication, do you believe them? Are they genuine? Are they real? Are there feedback methods? This is interesting too, right? Because I have mentioned several times, are there opportunities for people to provide feedback? And when you're looking at the healthy organization, do these feedback channels exist? And do they work? Oh, yes, we have this process. Just click on the link and you have the steps that you follow in order to provide your feedback. There was a joke we had at one of the places I worked because the memo would come out and say, do this in 3 easy steps. And step 1 is click on a link where there were 12 steps. It was enormously complicated. Is your feedback mechanism workable? Do people know what it is? Another story. I was on a ship, when I was in the service early on, and the commander of the ship would have open office hours every month or so, every several weeks or so. And the guy was absolutely hilarious. He was absolutely hilarious. And they would read from the suggestion box the questions and give him answers. And it was the Navy captain in charge of the ship, plus I was a part of the Marines, so there was a senior Marine officer who was also with him. He was talking about those things. And, do people feel confident, trustworthy, they can do this thing? And he would start and say, this is completely anonymous, so you can say whatever you want to. We will listen and we will respond. And so he reads this one question, and it was a dumb question. And he hands it to the person off the stand. He said, this is a terrible question. I want to find out who said this. And he hands it to the ops officer. Go out there and fingerprint this and find out who they are, and we're going to fire that person. It was absolutely hilarious because everybody knew nobody was getting fired because the guy was funny. But that trust existed. You knew you could communicate and you wouldn't get fired. People needed to have that kind of trust in order to be honest. One of the things about communication is how essential that trust is to the honesty that is to whether or not you will be successful. So we're talking about, are we healthy? Like Joseph Stalin would be the guy that would be doing what that captain said, right? So you would communicate with him bad news, and if you were lucky, you went to a concentration camp. That was the end of you. So everybody learned, don't be the guy that brings in bad news. So what happens? He never hears bad news. Everything is awesome. Everything is rosy. And everything is not true. It's imaginary because he doesn't know what's really going on. You have to be able to hear bad news, take it, and understand it in order that people will continue to do that, because otherwise you are not dealing with the real world. You are setting yourself up to be isolated and wrong. So do encourage people to participate. Can people complain? It's all in this same feedback loop conversation. Yes, they need to be able to complain, and they need to know how, and they need to know that someone is listening and they're not going to be fired. So when you're thinking about all of this, this is not so much of, how do I tailor my communication? This is, how do I look around me and see how well is the communication going on in this organization? And how healthy is this organization as it's reflected in the way that things are being communicated? Next topic. Clear and regular communication. This is a part of how you design your way of communicating, and this is more formal. As a leader, I want to have planned communications. I want to make them clear, and I want to make them regular. What I mean by that is there has to be a tempo. There has to be a tempo of what you're communicating. There has to be a cadence. So people know what to expect, when to expect it. And that creates an environment where people are they trust you. They know you're not keeping secrets, that you will tell them. Usually in a very healthy environment, they can always come and ask you, but sometimes they'll just say, this is so important, I need to ask my boss today, or I'm interested, right? When you have a cadence of regular communication, there's a lot of things down here, they'll just wait for you to have that, and they go, oh, that's the answer. Oh, now I understand. Oh, that's fine. That trusting, really teamwork quality of how you're communicating that is really enhanced by having a tempo of communication. There is always in every organization a grapevine, and as I said before, it's fast. So if you have a tempo of regular communication, you can keep the grapevine from creating dissension and disunity and problems that are inappropriate and unnecessary. It's more official, so it's less about people speculating. Grapevine is where you speculate the most. Building that trust, people are less fearful and less suspicious. People are more comfortable and confident that, they're in the know. I'm communicating with you because you're important. You're in the know. Yeah, I'm in the know. Secrets are not being kept from me. I don't have to worry about what's around the corner. And then you have less of that long-term kind of, he never talks to me, he hates me, I guess I'll go eat worms. That people can spiral into an emotional pit that's not real. And having that cadence of communication is very helpful for that. And I'm going to say, before we take our break, I want to cover this next section, and then we'll take a short pause. And that is the hindrances of communication. These are things to avoid, and this is really an important part of how you communicate that you want to be guarding yourself against, keeping yourself out of the pit. There was I have a lot of Marine stories. Early on, I was on the ship, my first deployment, on a ship with a Marine unit. And the ship we were on, we were all under the organization of the infantry company commander. He was the senior Marine officer there. We were an artillery platoon. He wasn't RCO, but he was a senior guy on ship, and so he would have his regular staff meetings. And he was the kind of guy that was, it seemed to us that there were a lot of things that were, this is dumb and nobody should ever do this kind of things, and a lot of frustration that built up around that. And so we were healthy Marines, and so we would complain. That was almost a part of the culture. Always complaining, always complaining, always complaining. But the guy was a senior officer to us in the Marines, and you can't just go around saying bad things about him. You gotta show proper respect. You gotta do your role. When you don't show the boss respect, then the people that work for you, they treat you the same way. It's like how you treat the boss is how you will be treated. So rather than spend our time complaining about the boss, what I said is that we need to talk about someone else. Let's talk about Bob. We made up a fictional character, and we would complain about Bob. And so I had the idea that no one was ever court-martialed for criticizing Bob. So it was a means of curbing our attitude in order to make sure that our communications were genuine and honest and well done, and you could take your emotions off to the side and not carry them into your communication. And one of the things that happens there, one of the things that's helpful, even if you think about this particular case, is that a real communication killer is condescension. If you're condescending toward the person you're trying to communicate with, then listening stops. There's no sharing. The things that you're saying lose their value and importance, their credibility. There is a signal that you give yourself and others when the person you're talking to is someone you think is beneath yourself. To condescend is to descend down, and you're looking at someone who's low and below you. And the signal that you give everyone that the person is like almost contemptible. It's contempt, it's condescension, all that stuff. And you can notice this. It's when your eyes roll. When your eyes roll, it says, oh, I think that person is beneath me, or what they're saying is beneath me. This is a critical mistake. When your eyes roll, note it, stop it. You're not going to have a good communication. And it doesn't matter if that person is beneath you. That's not a thing. So, it doesn't matter. Don't do it. Another thing that will kill your communication is when leaders lead with their opinions. And this isn't so much because leaders are bad and their opinions are bad. Leaders are often more experienced or more broadly aware of things that are going on. Their opinions are valuable and worth hearing. The problem is if you're the leader and you're always leading with your opinion, then what you do is you're shutting everyone else up. There's no room for their opinion to come in and say, well, yeah, leader, I appreciate that, but this is better than you. You have to have that kind of patience. You want to encourage people to bring ideas, because ideas are money. Innovation is money. I mean, that's producing value in the organization that you are, is when you're able to hear and understand what are the best ideas. And they may or may not be your own. You don't have to be the one who's always giving the ideas. You know, the idea of a leader is the one who's always deciding, always dictating, always planning, is a less productive organization, because you have typically around you a group of really savvy people that care about what you're doing and have all these different perspectives about how and what things are really happening. And so if you're able to encourage them to speak, then you get insights that you won't have. It will make you better. So if you're, as a leader, always starting with your opinion, you're gonna deprive yourself of all of that information, and you're gonna deprive the people you work with the desire to contribute in that space, the desire to bring their good ideas, the desire to think and to observe and to find better solutions. You lose it all. Next item on that list is a bad response to bad news. We already talked about Stalin. It's the same story. If everybody who brings you bad news becomes a villain, then your long-term effectiveness will be diminished because you will lose touch with reality. Another thing that will crush your communications is having a closed mind. When you decide once and live with it forever, that puts you in danger. The idea is that when you know everything, you will never learn anything. What would be the point, right? When you set and forget your ideas, then as the world changes around you, then you're just going to be left behind. I had to buy a printer recently for the office, and it had a fax option. And I have no idea what's the point of that. When was the last time I sent a fax? Not this century. Not this century. It's like, what's the point? Don't do it. That's what happens when you make up your mind and you drive on as if nothing is ever going to change around you. It will. Another thing that will kill that, remember that richness and productivity of the people around you bringing you innovative ideas, insights into things you don't know, a better solution to what's going on. If you never once go with whatever their idea is, then you will never get another new idea. You have to let people try things. And here's something that's interesting about that, maybe to you, is that I have found working in organizations around people that are bringing ideas to the table that I would often encourage and go with ideas that I thought were not as good as mine. Now, why would I do that? Why would I go with somebody else's idea when I know mine's better? A couple of reasons. One is I want people to bring me ideas that will solve a problem. And what if this idea solves the problem? I want people to bring them. What if it solves the problem? Then mission accomplished. I'm good with that. And then the person who brought the idea and implements the idea won't stop working on that idea because they're invested in wanting that to be successful. And they will learn how to have better ideas. They will learn how to implement ideas better. And the third thing that's most important, I've gone with other people's ideas in order to implement or solve a problem, even though I knew mine was better, only to discover later I was wrong. Their idea was better, my idea was not better, and it was fortunate that I shut up. I didn't say it. I didn't say, well, my idea is better. No, there's no I told you so in that kind of a world when you're communicating with people. Because too often, I was wrong. And by going with somebody else's ideas, I was joyfully made aware of my inadequacies because it was supported by the idea that I had people around me who were better than I was, that were helping to care for the things that were important for me. The last session I want to talk about in the leadership course on communication today are items that I want you to attend to carefully. How do you attend to these things carefully about what you say and how you say it? And the first one, these are pretty simple and straightforward rules. You know what they mean. Communicate standards and be consistent. That goes back a lot to the foundation we talked about, the character and attributes that you want to have inside yourself and what you want to work with others, is that having standards and consistently following those standards. The next one is about being aware of your biases and preferences. And I want to elaborate on that a little because of the environment that we've been through with, you'll hear a lot of conversation about, this implicit bias. You can go to implicit bias training. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I mean by this. It's more like, I'll start with an example again. Remember, I was talking about the one CO that we would complain about, Bob. The guy was a rambler, like I am, sadly, but he would ramble on. And so his meetings could be just endless. But the guy really had a strong preference for food. Meals were like training highlights for him every day. And so they always scheduled meetings with him like an hour before lunch, because no matter what happened, the meeting would end before lunch, no matter what was on the table. So there are things like that I'm thinking of, primarily being aware of your biases and your your prejudices, it's just which way you're inclined to go and to do. Just have some self-awareness about what you're like and taking into account the people you're with so that you're not an abusive pain in the neck. This next idea of letting people know where they stand. Now that's a real trick, because that sounds like you're going around and you're evaluating people and you're just letting them know exactly where they stand. Not really. It's a matter of basic honesty and being fair and open with others about who you are and what's going on. Also, in large organizations, having the kind of open, honest transparency about where you stand can also take place in terms of the evaluations that you're responsible for doing of the people that are working for you on behalf of the organization, so that the most meritorious can be the most rewarded, and those who are performing less well are aware enough that they can take actions in order to become better. One of the hardest things that leaders have to do is to look someone in the eye and say, "You're not doing well enough right now." And there has to be, an honesty there. That's not because you don't like them. It's because you do like them. If you like the people that you work with, and you should care for them whether you like them or not, and caring for them means wishing the best for them, then that means if they're not getting the job done well, that you're able to let them know that. That's essential information for them. It's essential information for the organization. It's essential information for you. Another example. One of the very best bosses I ever had in my life. He listened to me. He cared for me. He watched over. He made sure I had everything I needed. And I had to go into him, sit down in his office, and say, "I'm really terrible at this job. I don't even understand what I'm doing. I don't think I can ever be successful here because I don't understand." And this guy, I appreciate this guy a lot. And he said, "Fair." I don't think it came as a surprise to him. But what came as a little bit of a surprise to me, and think about this a little bit, is that his response was essentially, "Well, let me help you out." Let me help you out. And he was sincere about that. I was honest with him, and I shared this thing, and it was like I was letting him know where I stood. I'm dissatisfied with my performance in this job, and I don't see any hope for me. And he said, "I understand how you're feeling, and I can see the evidence of what you're saying. It wasn't one of those things that, I hate you, you let me down, and now I'm going to ruin your life forever. It was, you're not stupid, and you work hard. Let's put you in a place where you can be successful, and I know some people, and I can help you." And it was great. It turned out great for me. It turned out great for him, too, because he was able to get somebody who was good at that job working for him. Interesting. Letting people know where they stand is about honesty and having that kind of really fearless honesty. How many of you look forward to the day when you sit down in front of your boss and say, "Well, I'm crap. I can't do this job. You should really get someone else in here." Yeah, that was either courage or foolishness. Give praise when it's appropriate. You should always praise people if they deserve it. When you're praising people that are like doing mediocre, no, you're not fooling anybody. You praise people when it's appropriate, and you do it as quick as you can and as public as you can. It's almost like when I was talking earlier about say yes as often as you can to your children, and when you say no, explain as often as you can, because sometimes you'll have to say no and not explain. Well, you want to praise people when they deserve it so that it's real and it counts as soon as possible, because there's going to be times when you're going to have those honest conversations. Look people in the eye and say, you can do better. Praise in public. Do that honest face-to-face. You're not doing as well in private. But always take the opportunity. If you can say yes, say yes. If you can praise somebody because they've done a good job, do it. Quick and in public. Keeping others informed of changes that are going to affect them is really important in establishing a trust environment. Being a part of a really large organization is to live in a rumor mill and grapevine. Everybody watches the stock market, they listen to the news, they see what's happening in the organization, and they're going to speculate on those things that are happening and how it might affect them. One of the organizations I was a part of had a program where you could take some money out of your salary every week, and at the end of 6 months, they would buy you shares with that money at a discount. And it was really a great program for a moment when the stock price was climbing like mad. So everybody loved it. It was really fantastic. But I noticed a thing that was just absolutely real and true to me in my mind, is that when the company's stock price went up, everybody walked around like they were smart and powerful and the leader of the world. And when the price would go down, which they always do, they do this. And when they would go down, everybody, like, your head hangs down, your arms hang down, they don't swing, and you just walk around like you're depressed. And people would act like they were dumb. They didn't know how to do anything. It was hilarious. Like their IQ was tied to the stock price. I'm smarter today than I was yesterday, see? You got to let people know everything that you know that is real so that people can live in a real world, and keeping secrets isn't a benefit. There are policy things that have to happen in terms of what's confidential and what's not confidential, but where it doesn't apply, don't keep secrets. Don't keep secrets needlessly. And what happens especially is if you're doing that as a leader is that the people will do that with you. You will find out things that are going on in their life that are going to be important to your future planning. Oh, by the way, I'm going on a 3-week vacation out of the country. Things that are important to you, and they let you know in advance so you can plan and consider it, because we're all working on the same team. Keeping others informed, not keeping secrets. And that caring about others, we were talking earlier about, how do you create a group of people that are innovative and will try things and will not be afraid of failing, but will plan and do those things, is that's really about caring for your people. You're asking them to do something on behalf of the organization where you have a responsibility to lead. And you want to care for them in the sense that you also want them to grow as a person. You want them to have a future. You want them to be advancing in a direction. And caring for them is helping them to be healthy and working toward goals that are genuine and that they can accomplish. That's caring for them, really caring for them. Like when I said earlier, when you're on the telephone, smile, because people can hear that. The care you have for human beings, caring for their best, is something that people can hear. Whether they see it or not, they can hear that. And that also plays into the idea of what are the people around you? Are they the ends, not the means? Right? That's an interesting way to do it. It's like, I want to get this thing, and I'm going to use a person as an instrument in order for me to get that thing. The person is no longer a person. They're just a tool that I'm using to get the thing. And that doesn't work long term. What you have to do is understand the person. And if you need to do the thing and the person has to do it, you want to help them to become the person who can do the thing. And it's about them. Because you're going to have to do that thing more than once. And their ability to do it and do it well is going to be of value in a long term. So you see people as the end, not the means. Also, going out of your way to help your subordinates is all factored into that. It's just talking about that. You want to help them. Have the tools, have the mindset, have the opportunity, get the training, or have the attention paid to them so that they will pay the attention necessary. It's a partnership in building a very effective team that you have to invest your time in the people on the team for their sake. The end. Taking responsibility for the members of your team is also essential and important. When it goes wrong, that's your fault. And you say, that was my mistake. Yeah, but this person who worked for you, they did this dumb thing. He said, that was my mistake. It may be part of that, the captain goes down with the ship idea. You've heard that. The captain always goes down with the ship. Navy saying is that if the ship is going down, no matter what went wrong, it was the captain of the ship's responsibility to make sure that didn't happen, and he didn't. You need to think of that metaphorically and not literally, and not as a rule that must always be followed there, but you need to be the guy who's willing to take responsibility for failures that happen among your team. Don't be the guy who points the finger and say it was that guy. Don't be that guy. People know who that is. I had a scenario like that. I had a boss who was very careful to make sure that everybody knew it was not his fault. And he was away and a thing happened. And so I spent the time talking with his boss and solving this problem. And he came back, and the first email that came out from this guy was not my fault, it was his fault. Since I'd spent the previous week talking to his boss, I called him, his boss, and said, anything I need to do about this? And he goes, nah, I know what's going on. Okay, click, click. Don't be the guy that's pointing the finger, because everybody knows who you are. And those become dead communications. You just fall off and never get listened to. Take responsibility. It's worth it. Your people will be willing to risk anything for that. And they will take risks because they know they're not alone, that you're not going to shove them under the bus. So take responsibility. This next item is very important, is building independence into others. Building independence into others. Giving the people around you the skills necessary to make good judgments and the independence to be able to make those judgments on their own. Some of that is about providing guidelines around which they have free rein to do whatever it is that they want to do to solve a problem. They have these guidelines. They're free to experiment, to do those things. They feel free because they know that they're safe, because you'll care for them, protect them, and they can discover things that can become really enormously valuable. So you want to do that. You want to be able to have people around you that are capable of acting independently of you. giving them skills. The next item is to exhibit personal diligence. That is an ongoing thing to make sure you're the guy who's working hard all the time to do your best. A leader will have an influence on his team that is beyond words. That people will copy what you do. How you approach your work will be how the people who work for you approach their work. If you're never paying attention, never learning, never growing, then they won't either. They will rarely do that. People are all have their own drives and motivations and goals for how they're doing things that they want to achieve in their career, and they will work for those things all the time. But in working in a team, your boss has this undue influence over how you're approaching your job and how you're working. And if you're the one who's being diligent, doing the hard work, planning ahead, paying attention, then people will copy you. They will mimic what you're doing. So be diligent in all the things you do. Be tactful with others. That is almost, be polite. It's a kindergarten lesson. Be polite. Be tactful. There's ways to communicate things that are encouraging and helpful and insightful. And you can communicate that same message with bitter condemnation. Guess which one works better? Be tactful. Because what you're after is the good of your own self, the good of the people around you, and the good of the organization for which you're working. It's really funny because in this sense, I'm talking all about a corporate environment. But this applies at home too. This is also things you do at home. Most of our life is spent at work, so I'm kind of focusing on that in the examples. But it's also true at home. Oftentimes what happens is that you spend the most time with at home with your spouse, with your children, with your friends, with the people that, when you're tired because you've had a long, hard day, you are exhausted and the most relaxed and the least likely to be tactful. You be blunt, you're tired, you're just going to say what you really feel because you can, because you're with your family. And that's sometimes very bad. That is sometimes really bad in that you don't really say what you really feel. You can say bitter, resentful, nasty things to the people that you love the most. Well, that's ridiculous because that's not how you feel. You don't feel nasty and bitter toward the people that you love the most. But the moment can get the better of you. So a reminder to always be tactful. It's important at work because what you say to your boss may have some long-term implications as to whether you will continue to be gainfully employed. Well, you know what? It's important at home too. And being tactful doesn't mean lying. It means just don't be a jerk. Be careful. Be patient. Care for the people around you. If you're going to be dutiful all day and dutiful at home and tactful at home, you're going to be exhausted. That's life. Get used to it. Learn from others. I said earlier is once you know everything, you are done learning. I don't ever want to be done learning because I know I'm really not capable of knowing everything. And the best teachers that I found are the people around you. This is fun. There are a lot of people around you that are very successful, and you can watch what they do, and you can copy what they do, and you can learn to do well the things that they do well also. But my favorite way of learning is learning from the pain of others. The pain and suffering of others is one of my favorite teachers because I don't like pain and I don't like suffering. And if someone else can do it for me, I'm grateful for that. And I want to make sure I learn everything I possibly can so that I don't have to have that pain and suffering on my own. So if you have taught me things by going through painful and terrible things, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll do my best to avoid whatever trap you fell into. Learning from others is huge. Demonstrating confidence. Leaders must demonstrate confidence. I had one of our senior officers of a battalion when I was in the Marines was a guy that was very highly respected. And he was speaking to all of us lowly second lieutenant, first lieutenant infants, teaching on leadership, and he said, you should have an aura. You should have an aura about you. He said, if you don't have one, get one. If you don't know what that is, find out. That was a lesson. Okay, that was a lesson that I heard how many years ago? 40 years ago? Demonstrating confidence is a part of this. Having an aura about you that gives others confidence in where you are and what is going on. It's an ability to be calm in the storm. It is the kind of thing that when you walk into the room that people notice. Your presence is a comfort to others. Part of leadership is being able to bring that to others around you, having an aura. I mention that because it was very meaningful to me, and I learned what he meant, and I did those things necessary to be able to project that sense of confidence, mostly, I would say. Confidence, but also security, calmness in a storm. Those are important leadership traits that are, remember, we're attending carefully to the things that make our communications go well. That having that aura of confidence and security, calmness, it doesn't matter what problem we find ourselves in, what pit we're in, what disaster we're recovering from. We know that we are exactly the kind of people that can solve that problem and move on and restore peace, stability, and prosperity. You know, you just bring that with you. Giving opportunity for others to express ideas, personality. Those things are important in a leader to do. You want the people around you to feel free. You want them to be free. You know, at the very least, think of it this way. You know, as I said, I like to do a lot of experiments in life. If you allow people around you that freedom and confidence that they can express lots of different things, as I said, at the very least, what's the least you can expect? The very least you can expect to be entertained. Because people are wildly fascinating. They're interesting, and they will do crazy things, and they will entertain you with who they are. We're all created in God's image. And as different, wildly different as people are, that leads me to believe that God is so multifaceted that I can never comprehend it. And that if people are free to express who God created them to be around me, then my life is better for it. Delegate often and well. I mentioned this before, we're not really getting into all of the skills necessary to delegate to others. That's a specialty all of its own. Delegating is essential, and it is complex, and it is difficult. And as a leader, and you're communicating and your ability to share what and how you need to build a solid, positive organization, you need to be able to delegate, and you need to do it really well. And last, I will say for this list is encouraging those around you to experiment as well. Ingenuity is the engine of productivity. Ingenuity is the way we solve problems that are insolvable. It's the way we invent things that have no right to exist. Our world is full of the craziest innovations that people 100 years ago could barely imagine. And 200 years ago, what would people think? Think about flying, to fly a plane. And the things that happen with planes and flying and drones and all this stuff that's happening. George Washington never imagined such a thing was possible. Abraham Lincoln was adapting to trains. My mother, when she was a young child, this was in the time of radio, and was in a class, grade school, junior high, something, and the teacher was saying, you have to use your imagination and come up with things that people have never come up with. The whole world is open. And she remembered and shared, he said, she thought to herself, imagine and invent what? It's all been done. There's nothing new. She shares that just to remind you, there's always opportunity for something new. People are enormously creative and imaginative. And you want to help the people around you to have a robust ability to imagine the unimaginable. That is the end of my conversation with you about leadership and communication. Next time, we'll be talking about doing the work of leadership. I have some items on here I'll list out here, but there's one and only one that I am looking forward to the most. And that is the element of leadership that is all about living in the future. Living in the future. That is a key element of doing the work of leadership. We'll talk about goals, progress of others, decision-making, motivation, finding the root causes of things, adapting, timing. All of that is a part of doing the work of leadership we will talk about next time. I want to thank you all for your time here today and for your attention. I want to thank Christian and the rest of the AV team. Thank you. Thanks also to Katie and my wife Debbie for all the administration that went into this. And we'll talk to you next time. I would always do things as experiments, right? Even Jesse said it from the pulpit. Yeah. The secret is out. I'm terribly embarrassed. But no, experiments were the great thing to do. And we would do, in the IT world, we would do disaster recovery tests. And the way it was done before I got there is that you had boxes to check. And so you always had the one guy on the team who knew everything and could do anything. And so on that weekend, that guy just worked 24 hours over the weekend, and he checked all the boxes, and you were successful. And I said, no, we're not doing that. This is our only chance to fail. And so I wouldn't let that guy do the work. Somebody else had to do it. Well, they would be panicked. Say, I can't do this. I'm not the expert. I don't know this stuff. I said, well, I will allow you to call them, but you have to do all of the things. It was an experiment to let them try. Because what was the worst that could happen? They would fail. But for one thing, if they failed, it was my fault. And I said, that was my fault. That's part of leadership too. But it was fun and exciting, and people build this huge amount of confidence in being able to do things and not fail. And that's really important. There were also some times in the Marine Corps where they would say, Lieutenant, we got this, we'll do this thing. I'd say, okay. And then it would fail. And I would say, okay, well, next time we'll do it differently. We'll do it, it's like, we're going to do it my way. So yeah, sometimes. But then again, it's also, remember, in all this stuff, it's this long-term objective that you want to get to. And the long-term objective is I want to have a group of people around me that function at this highest level of performance that's possible with them. They're all super hot at this stuff. And how do you get there from where you are? Maybe you're closer, maybe it's not there. Well, part of it is letting people get out there and try stuff. And you don't so much set people up for failure, but you set people up to experiment, to try things, and to risk failure. What if I fail? I don't care. That's what this is about. Well, then it's a tough challenge in terms of, like, my last work environment was just this steady flood of requirements, things you had to get to. There were 1,000 things that were due in the next week, month, quarter, over and over again. It was just constant bombardment of this thing. And my reaction to that I still look back and say this is correct, is that one is I just quit caring that people found out I didn't know. And so they would say to me, I don't know how to do this. There's no way for me to do this because I don't understand anything you're saying. And the response I found was that the people that did know, that were responsible, said, oh, I'll help you with that. Oh, yeah, let's set up a meeting. We'll do that. And people would help you do that sort of thing, and that was good. And the other thing about it was that any particular thing that is the hoop, that is, my boss and my boss's boss is asking me every day, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? My attitude was, we're learning the process, and we're going to do the process, and we'll get done when we get done. Not to say I'm shining them on. We were doing our best, but I quit being afraid of failure. I just wasn't afraid of failure because my goal was still out there. I want to get to the thing. And if this is the process that we have to follow to complete a project, knowing that process, making it repeatable is more important than checking the box right now. We got to learn how to do this. Let's learn how to do this, and then let's check the box. So does that answer your question? Yeah, that's where leadership becomes an art and not a science. Which one do you do this time?